How did you go about learning how to cook? Is it just opening up a cookbook or?
So I came from a family of cooks on my father's side and restaurateurs and chefs and people that believe that Jello is a salad on my mother's side. So I grew up in a household. My brother and I were trying to think of like how many dinners we actually had growing up, and I came up with 9 at one point, and then he and I together could only come up with 7. And then when I was talking to my mom, we came up with 6. And so there wasn't a lot. We had basically a repertoire of the same meals that just rotated for our whole childhood. And so I remember going out after church one day and we went to a Chinese restaurant and somebody was saying what a good Chinese restaurant it was. And I remember it so explicitly because I remember thinking, how do they know it's good? Like, what makes it good? It's just a Chinese restaurant. And I had no concept of food at all. So taco seasoning came in a packet, and you put ground beef in this packet, and that was it. No onions, no garlic. We had oranges, bananas, apples. Broccoli was generally overcooked to the point where it was yellow, and so no offense, Mom. We've harassed my mom for years now because she's
My mom's
actually
a
a really
nutritionist, so I can sympathize.
she's a really good cook now. So, but my dad is super picky. So that's when you're dealing with somebody. His mother was basically a chef, and he was picky, and my mom couldn't get it right, so she just kind of threw in the towel. So I don't blame her on that. I wouldn't have cooked for him either. But he. So we had a very limited concept of food, and I remember explicitly like what makes food good. And so that was kind of when my world cracked open because then I started researching and I started learning and I would go to people's houses and I would ask their moms like if they would make things and treats and I'm like, how do you know how to cook? Like where do you learn? And so then I started reading cookbooks and that's kind of the whole story. But that started when I was fairly young. I was about 9. And I started cooking, I think, when I was 12, 13, 14. Not making family meals, but just playing, like making cakes and cookies and pasta and fun stuff. And then as soon as I left home, I started baking. And so that was kind of my gateway into connection, where food actually had a connective purpose for me and others. And then I realized, like, oh, you can make a cake, just a normal recipe, and it's good and people will eat it and love it. But then somebody else makes a cake and it's fabulous. And it's like, how'd you do that? Why is your cake so much better? And so, and I just have that kind of neurotic personality where I'm always seeking out the best that I can do, the best that I can create. Like, how much information can I take in? How much can I know about something in order to have a certain sense of mastery? So, I love food and I love learning about different cultures and I love the excitement of, not knowing if something's going to turn out or even what it's supposed to taste like or even if these flavors go together and just trying it. So, hope that answered your question. Do you cook, Griffin?
I cook a little bit. I'm kind of limited because I live by myself and I work 24-hour shifts. So from that, I tend to eat kind of poorly on shift just because I'm confined to a certain station. I can't go out, and we have no dishwasher and limited cooking supplies. So it's kind of hard. But I do make burritos with a chipotle marinade, and
Mm-hmm.
I try to use like uh, basmati rice a little bit better than just the value stuff. I
Mm-hmm.
find that once you start making stuff with fresher ingredients, it tastes so much better than going out to Taco Bell or something like that. So
And once you have basmati, you cannot go back to Uncle Ben's.
no,
That's awesome. So I have a very specific memory of basmati rice. I was a nanny when I was 17 for a woman that was from Malaysia, and I have never had food like that. That was kind of my intro to like Pan Asian kind of food. So she cooked a lot of American dishes, but they always had this like beautiful island flair. And I was eating pot, like rice from the day before out of the rice cooker going, why is this so good?
Yeah, rice is probably one of my favorite foods.
I'm with you on that one.
Apparently, I haven't been eating the right rice.
Oh man, basmati.
It takes a little bit of time, but it's worth it. And like, I'll keep it in a box, in a little Tupperware box, and I'll make burritos for lunch or make one for dinner, and it keeps pretty well as long as you use it in like a couple days. But some people will make it and then they'll use it for stir fry or something a little bit later.
Hmm. And the nice thing about basmati is if you have an Asian grocer near you, it can be cheaper than California rice and so good. Hi, girl. Welcome. So, what else do you guys have? Ask me some questions. Tell me some stories.
Well, what's some recipes that are coming up this week?
Okay, so Mo and I preserved lemons. So, we did pickled lemons, and then I did a quick and easy lemon oil, and then I used the lemon oil in a lentil salad. So, that is on my computer right now. And the rest of it, I'm open. I've got maybe 300 things on a list, and it's kind of like what's in season, what looks inspiring. Hi. And yeah, what do you guys want to see? What are you interested in? I know a rice dish is on my list.
Yeah, that'd be good now.
I'm hungry now. Yeah, I'd
Yeah,
like to see breakfast items that are pretty easy to put together. Something like a quiche or something like that.
Yeah, that's a great one, especially egg dishes that you can make the night before in your fridge and then bake off in the morning.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Hmm.
all the weekend's coming up. I wouldn't mind a bunch more stuff to try out this weekend. I kind of went a little nuts last weekend.
That is awesome. I'm so stoked. I have my violets are coming up, and they're my favorite flower. They're coming up in the garden. They're everywhere. So I've done hours of research on trying to make a violet extract, but I originally just end up candying them. But now I'm not doing sugar this month, so I'm like, darn it, my violets.
Just keep rubbing it in. I'm still under a couple feet of snow here, so keep it up. I'm
Nice.
gonna ship you out some snow.
It's nice. Bust out your cross country skis.
What's that?
You have to bust out your cross country skis.
Um,
At once.
last pair of those I owned was maybe about 7 years old.
It does make winter more bearable.
Try playing ice hockey in Kentucky. You don't get very far.
I'll trade you spaces. You come up here for a while, you can still play it.
So, Paul, are you cooking right now? How did you learn how to cook? What got your interest in food?
I've worked at several different restaurants and stuff just for jobs growing up and in college and stuff like that. So, my mom always made like the healthy stuff. So, I was kind of wanting to make something a little bit better. So, I started out with like cookies and desserts and things like that. And then my brother also kind of likes to cook. So, we would, just try to figure out different dishes. Mostly it was like chicken based things just because it's cheap and easy to get. We're not like cooking prime rib or anything like that or butterflying steaks a whole lot. So mainly just things on the grill and things that are easy and quick to make and don't have a lot of cleanup and don't require a lot of uh, processing like chopping and things like that because we didn't really have a whole lot of tools other than what we had at the house, which wasn't a whole lot. So
Mm-hmm. And what's your signature dish?
I really don't have like a signature dish, like an entree. The the chicken thing I got from my brother, the marinade for the chicken, it's pretty good. It's kind of like similar to what they have at Qdoba or Chipotle. If you have those kind of restaurants near you, it's very similar to that. But
Mm-hmm.
that's the only thing like that I could make for somebody other than just grilling a steak or a hamburger or something like that.
Mm-hmm. So
Spaghetti.
what does conscious eating mean to you?
Not going out to eat.
That's
I think it's
valid.
more just trying to find using things like eggs and fresh fruit and yogurt and things that aren't as processed. I don't pay a whole lot of attention. Like I don't go out and buy like I don't know. Like most of the healthy stuff is a little bit more expensive, so I generally just get like the basic hamburger meat and spaghetti and pasta and things like that.
That's the kind of stuff I ate in college. Well, without the
Yeah. Well, I've only got myself to cook for, and I don't have a dishwasher, so I'm kind of limited. So I'm trying to explore, some different things, but it's kind of hard when you don't want to spend a lot of money on stuff, and then I don't like eating the same thing for leftovers. So I kind of got into the bad habit of eating out just because when I worked at a like Panera Bread or Tex-Mex restaurant and stuff, you would get discounts on the food, so that's what you would eat, and that's I kind of got in the habit of doing that. So I'm trying to look for different dishes and things that aren't very expensive and that are a little bit easier to make. Like I make eggs and omelets and stuff like that, but they're not like mind blowing ingredients or anything like that. It's just kind of the regular stuff that everybody eats.
Yeah. Well, and you learn how to cook and you learn how to make food taste good and you can eat real whole food easily. It doesn't have to be fancy.
There's a question here from just paying attention. She was asking if you could go over the your your food co-op, I think it was. Let me just look here. Can you talk
Yes.
a little bit more about how you set up the co-op for food buying?
Where are you seeing that, Colin? I turned the Q&A on the last one, and now I see that it's off. And I did read something saying I couldn't change it once I started broadcasting. Oh wait, I see it. Chat. Oh my gosh. Okay, I've got a whole list of stuff. Okay, so the food co-op. Let me read it here.
It's up there a little bit.
Okay. Okay, so the food co-op, I've heard various reports from other people that have tried to do it, and I guess it's regional and there's a set quota that they allow per region. So I buy through it's a distributor, a food distributor. It's called United National, UNFI, United National Industries, I don't know, UNFI.com. And so those guys are the largest provider of natural foods to co-ops around the United States. They have thousands of little co-ops, but they also provide to grocery stores. So I go to my local market and generally pick up, and they distribute to all of the little markets around town. So they have dishwashing detergent, foods, anything natural. You can get, bamboo plates and plastic spoons made out of corn that are biodegradable, like anything that kind of falls under the natural foods category. And so those guys, you have to have a business or a tax ID number. So my girlfriend and I, when we set it up, they have a rental business. And she applied, and she's the one that went through the application process. So I can't tell you what that was. But what ended up happening is it was just a small business, and you can set up as a small private co-op or a tiny co-op, and you don't have to have a business license that establishes you as a co-op. You can just have a business, a tax ID number. So she set it up, and what their limits are is you have a $500 minimum per quarter, which is super easy to do, even for a family of two. But I've since got friends involved in it, and so when I go, I ended up like taking my husband's huge car and filling it up because I've got other families that are buying through my account. And so to set that up, I had somebody that wanted to do it in Portland, and when they called UNFI and they said we'd like to set up a co-op, can you send us an application? And they said at the time that they had maxed out the amount of small co-ops that they were serving at that time, but they would put them on a list. And so I haven't heard back from them. That was maybe 6 months ago. So just call them and see and say you'd like to set up a small co-op. And once you start to do it, you'll realize like that it's easy to spend $500 a quarter. And if you get a couple families involved, then you can order more often and you can split stuff, which is really convenient too. So that's who I go through. And if you guys are on the west coast of the United States, you can buy through Azure Farms. So Azure has a really excellent co-op, and oops. Oh, thank you. So Azure Farms has an excellent co-op, and they deliver once a week, I believe, or once a month to about 80 different locations on the West Coast. So you can go to their website, and they're actually cheaper on a lot of products than UNFI is for me. So my girlfriend's making nut cheeses out of cashews, and so we priced out cashews through Azure and UNFI, and Azure was substantially cheaper. So that's a great one if you guys are interested and you don't want to go to the hassle of setting up like business or anything like that, or UNFI if they're not accepting applications at the time, then go through Azure Farms because you don't need any special anything. You just put your order in on their website and then you pick it up on the day that they deliver it to your area.
Are you getting all of your foods from the co-op or just some of the basic things?
So I get all of my hard goods, things that won't go bad within, it depends on how fast I use the food and what quantities they come in. So some things I can buy a case and it's 4, 1 pound bags, and if that's something like polenta that I use all the time or fava beans, then I'll order that no problem. Or a case of peanut butter is 24 jars. I go through maybe 16 jars a year, so then I just get creative and start making peanut butter cookies and giving them away. And so, I end up using it, but even if I didn't use those last 6 jars, it would still be cheaper in the long run. So things that are in large quantities, I try to share or split with somebody, or I just buy them in my store in quantities that my husband and I will eat. But anything that has a shelf life and that I will use within 6 months to a year, depending on what the product is, I'll go ahead and order from them.
You have
all my fresh stuff, I shop 4 times a week. I just stop by the little market at our house and get all the produce and stuff like that.
Okay. Do you find it hard to plan meals because you're kind of tied into the whole co-op order of you've got X amount of ingredients, so do you I guess because you've been cooking a while, then you can find different ways to make different things out of what you have, but I didn't know if that takes some time or an adjustment period for you.
I find meal planning to be nearly impossible. Because I'm just not a planner. I can't plan. I'm terrible at it. And so what I do, like how I get inspired for a meal, is I understand that most of my basic ingredients, I don't know if you saw my pantry video, but I try to have like a lot of stuff that's my base ingredients on hand. And then when I go to the store, I just let the vegetables dictate what I buy. So if broccolini looks good, that's what I'm getting. If there's fresh peas in season, that's what I'm getting. And so a lot of times I'll take the ingredients home and like, what can I make out of this? And my default is to go to recipes and foods that I've made before that I know, but I generally try to push myself into making new stuff so that I can create new things and learn new foods. And so I don't meal plan, but like today, for instance, I was making my husband a sandwich for lunch, and the sandwich had arugula pesto, and it had preserved lemon paste, and it had all of this weird stuff like pickled cherry tomatoes. you couldn't make a recipe for somebody because it would take them 4 days to make this sandwich, but it was what was in my fridge. And so I
Right.
just put it together. So stuff like that, like when Mariah, my girlfriend, came over this week and we preserved lemons, she's like, yeah, this was super fun, but I don't know what to do with these. And so then that's the challenge that I love, is having an ingredient and then creating something to do with it, or a few somethings to do with it.
Yeah, I just find that I'll go and I'll be in the mood for sweet potatoes or pears or something like that, and I'll go buy them, and then I'll just never get around to eating them because I have some things, but I don't have like any kind of big base of like all my beans are like black beans in a can or something like that. So it's kind of tricky to buy things and then use them all together so it you don't have like all meat and no vegetables or no fruit or anything like that. So I guess I have to think about more when I go to the grocery store at 10 o'clock at night and I'm starving.
Right. Well, yeah, shopping when you're hungry is dangerous. But I think you touched on something that it's the most important thing that I found when I was writing about food. People would write in and say, okay, I read this recipe. I went to, 5 different stores. I bought all of the ingredients that you have and I made it. And now what do I do with this stuff? And to me, it's like a dagger into my heart. It is what I do. And I'm like, oh, here's your curry mix and you need 25 spices. Because that's how I cook, because those are the spices that I have. And so, but that's like food 401. When you're starting at food 101 and you read a recipe, and this is what I did when I learned how to cook, is you follow it so literally, but then there's a tremendous amount of waste because you made that recipe, but you don't want to make it another 3 or 4 times using that stuff. But what do you do with the rest of that stuff? And so the internet is really is huge for helping you plug in ingredients and actually find recipes. But you need a base skill set of food, and you need kind of an understanding of flavor. And so that's just something that develops from doing it. So as a cook, like there's certain growth periods that I have gone through, like working in my girlfriend's restaurant was a huge eye opener for me. And it just kind of changed the way I saw food and cooked food. And so you go through these different spurts at times of your life. But the one that I learned the most from is when we were living out of a car for 15 months driving through Africa. So we went to South Africa, and I went to a Muslim spice merchant, and I bought a spice jar that was about this big of all spices, like every spice that I could get my hands on. And then I bought chickpeas, lentils, and rice. And the rest of it was a complete unknown. And so we'd go into the cities, and I had a tiny little freezer we had a solar array on the ceiling. And so I had a tiny little freezer, and I would fill it to the top with butter and mozzarella cheese, Parmesan, whatever I could find. And the rest was an unknown. So if all went bad, we could eat rice and beans, no problem, and then we would have seasonings, and it would be great. But that
Right.
gets old fast. And so when I'm buying greens from a lady that we don't speak the same language, and she's pulling them out of this little riverbed and handing them to me in a bucket, and I'm like, I don't know what these are, let alone how to cook them. So for me, it just forced me to learn to try foods and to see what you have and say, with this 12 ingredients, what can I create? And there's some dogs along the way. Like they're not all good. But that was a huge learning experience because I didn't have the internet, I didn't have cookbooks, and I didn't have stores. And so without stores, I became very resourceful in the kitchen and learned how to manage the small amounts of food that we have, because I've always been kind of an abundance person. Like I want to have everything so I don't have to go to the store. So I didn't have everything and I couldn't go to the store. So that was hugely beneficial for me as a cook, is to say, okay, so I have pears and I have some potatoes. What can I make? Like, how can I make this delicious? Do I roast the sweet potato and make a pear salsa? Something. And how can I use these foods? Because food is medicine. So the more diversity you have in your diet, the more nourished we are. So it's a little bit of a different approach to food, and I'm totally guilty of that. I'm like, here's a recipe, this is how you cook it, now go do it. And I do take for granted that there's a lot to get from the beginning, from the basics to where I am. But there's also value in all of those lessons and techniques and all of it, because you go through that and that's how you learn. So yeah, I mean, it's an excellent question, and it's kind of a problem is somebody that wants to teach people how to cook. I want to teach people that are very experienced cooking how to do new things or new techniques or new dishes or maybe even a new cultural food. But then you also have people that have never cooked before. So how do you communicate to that whole continuum of people without dumbing the recipes down for the beginner and insulting the person that might be very intrigued with learning how to cook the way you cook? So I was talking to my dad the other day, and he's like, okay, you need buzzwords like fast and easy and quick, and I'm like, I'm not that kind of person. I'm not that kind of cook. So it would be highly misleading for me, but I'm also super passionate, and the person that's never cooked before, if they come to my channel, like that, I want them there. I want to teach them like fundamental basic stuff. So that's a challenge. And then when you write about food, you don't know how much to include. Like, how much do you assume and how much detail do you put in there? And a lot of times, 500 word count for a column, that's all you have. So that dictates how much information you share. But you do a disservice to people that are wanting to learn and they don't have a baseline knowledge. So it's tough.
What I've seen another YouTuber do was he would show you how to make it, but he would put all the specifics for the ingredient list on his blog, so that way you would go to his channel and watch the video, and then you would go to the blog to see the specific ingredient amounts. And I thought that was a good way because you could get in and see what it looked like and what it took to make it, how long. But if you really wanted to make it, then you could go over to the blog and look at that. And I thought that was a pretty good way of doing it. That way you can kind of reach your different audience interest level.
And that's excellent. And I definitely want to do that. I'm not a tech girl, so learning editing and video and camera has been a monumental thing for me. So
Yeah.
I was trying to pawn off the website on my husband, and he showed me a GoDaddy website he was building one night, and I was like, no, like that was not what I had in mind. But thanks for the effort. So it's definitely up to me. But I do put all of my recipes, links, and food lists always underneath the video. I just don't remember to say that in the videos.
Right, yeah. I think most people get that.
But a website is excellent because then you can link to really basic needs. Like if you just say saute, you could link to this is the fundamental of sauteing, or you just have a lot more flexibility and you can captivate more people on where they are on the learning spectrum. That's a great suggestion, and that's definitely something that's there that I need to do.
Don't worry too much about it, the website being difficult. You can kind of start as basic as you really want. It can just be pretty much all text, and as you kind of fill around with it and grow and develop and try new things, you'll build it up from there, but you can start it out pretty simple.
Thank you. I need that reminder.
Don't try and make it perfect.
I get bogged down. I see somebody's website is super cool and beautiful. I'm like, yeah, I want one like that. I know. Sometimes simple is best. Oftentimes.
But you got to remember, those are the people that started with the simple as well. They went on to those sites years ago that said, hey, sign up here and you get a free web page and you can kind of play around. Well, that's how everyone started.
Yeah, it's true. And I'm sure like the user interfaces are just getting easier and easier and easier. So I haven't done it. So would you recommend WordPress, or there's another one like MySquares or something like that?
Honestly, I haven't messed around with web pages myself in years.
Any web designers out there? You guys give me some tips. I'd love it. So what else? Okay, we've got some more questions coming in. Some of my favorite books, cookbooks, I did catch some of them from your bookshelf video and I'm enjoying looking through the Jerusalem cookbook. So that Jerusalem cookbook, he has a few. He has one called Ottolenghi and one called Plenty. And the Plenty is all vegetables, but he never once uses the word vegetarian or vegetable. It's titled Plenty, and it's just a book of the most gorgeous vegetable recipes you've ever seen. So he is a Jew. He's from Israel, and his cooking partner, Tamami, is a Muslim from Palestine. And so they have collaborated in bringing their like homeland foods together. So Ottolenghi has a couple restaurants in London, and then he writes for The Guardian, and then he has several cookbooks. And I am more enamored with him, and every time I make a recipe, I'm just overwhelmed by not only his grasp of his regional food, because that's very specific to all of us to have an understanding of what our kind of heritage foods are, but how he exceeds expectations every time. Like just every time, like anytime I make something from his books. There's a girl I believe she's out of San Francisco. Her name's Heidi Swanson, and I love her. Her recipes her books are titled Simple, Everyday Food, Simple, Everyday Food, something like that. It's not exactly, it's like simple, but it's not super complicated, and she's like a healthy version of Ina Gartner, the Barefoot Contessa. So the Barefoot Contessa has great recipes, but you're going to be putting a pound of butter in your cake and maybe another half pound in the frosting. So she's very meticulous with her testing and recipe testing, and her recipes always work. But Heidi Swanson is like the healthy version of Ina. So her books are just simple stuff that you want to eat, like soba noodles with peanut sauce and green onions, or just it's easy stuff that you can put together legitimately for a lunch, and it's just kind of like the way I eat. It's the kind of food that I like. So I like her books, and she's got a website called 101 Cookbooks.
You got muted.
You're muted there, Corinne.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
There
And
you
I
go.
love Thomas Keller as far as chefs. He's one of my faves. Like he's just Americana, like through and through Americana, but he just does it better than anybody else. That's another one. All I have is recipes my family came up with or was handed down from friends, etc. My thing is trying to come up with something interesting and good. Maybe if you do a beginner series, which I will watch. I think that's an excellent idea, and I love that. And when I used to teach skiing, I started skiing when I was 3, and so when I took my instructor course, like I had no idea how to teach somebody skiing because I didn't know how you skied. Like, how do you break it down into words? And so I'm kind of like that with cooking too. I forget what it means to, not be able to distinguish what a good restaurant from a bad restaurant, like when I was 9. So I think that's an excellent idea, and just have a series that's really basic, like fundamental skills that you can learn and apply across the board to cooking in general.
That'd be great.
Mhm.
I think there's probably going to be stuff in that everyone could pick up on.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it would be good to do like a basic dish and then at the end and say, and if you're comfortable, you can like add like basil or rosemary or something like that to like a spaghetti or something like that. I think that would also kind of so that way people aren't just like, oh, I know how to make that. You can have like a extra little whatever your particular spin on it is.
That's a fantastic idea. And Like I do that a lot. If I am pressed for time, I'll make a very stripped down version of something that is way more elaborate. And I think that's important to show people the distinction between the two. That's an excellent idea. Thank you. Let's see, we have some more. I think you do a great job communicating to a broad group of people. I think genuineness makes for universal appeal. Yes, I would agree. So thank you for that. That's nice. Just being a human being, and I'm super passionate about food. So, you know, that's my area of expertise. You guys, it's like Cody in the kitchen. You got to see him fail miserably in the kitchen and me out in the woods, but it's one thing to show what you're passionate about, but people sometimes forget that you're not an expert in all areas. And being a fairly expert cook, like you kind of forget what that means to be a beginner. So I love that, and I love the reminder to go to start from the basics, or at least a lot of things that I do start will be very simple. They'll be fundamental skills, but I won't say it as such. I won't point it out as this is a fundamental technique. And I think that's really important, is to have, you know, those techniques and those skills broken out and kind of highlighted so people understand, like, these are the building blocks. Expert cook, like, you kind of forget what that means to be a beginner. So I love that, and I love the reminder to go from the basics, or at least you're just paying attention. My the video is playing in the background, and we're getting reverb on it. Fundamental skills, but I won't. Oh, thanks, Jazz. Squarespace is that's the web design that I was trying to think of. And I think that's really, what do you think of that one? Are you familiar with it? Okay, so even on the kitchen, utensils, pots, and pans series I learned a few things I never knew. Good, thank you. I love that. I'm super stoked about that. This is going to be good because I don't want to dumb down what I'm doing, but I'm not doing anything that's really fancy either. Like, I'm not making laminated dough for you guys. But I need to, it looks fancier because I use so many ingredients, and I'll try cuisines from other countries, and that is not the norm. And so just being reminded of that, whether you want to start really basic and then add to, I think is an excellent bridge.
Still trying to track down a Dutch oven myself. I've seen a few of your videos with that, and there's a lot of stuff I want to try with it.
Yeah, Craigslist is a good one. If you were closer, I'd just stick my mom on it. She's really good at finding stuff like that. So easy. I recommended it for a friend who still uses the front page for his website and won't let go. It's a drag and drop. They have some good tutorials, videos for as well. Okay, that's awesome. Tony Person, what are your thoughts on commercial food ingredients that are designed to increase consumption and obesity? For example, taste enhancers. Ooh, I would even go into artificial sweeteners and all of those things. Yeah, Tony, I have a lot of thoughts on this stuff. So what's happened in our food system, and I'm going to go off on a total tangent here, so just cut me off. But what's happened with our food system is industry has found ways to leverage subsidies for farmers for wheat, corn, and soy. So these are the cheapest products. So what industry has done is like, how can we make cheap wheat, cheap corn, and cheap soy tasty? So that's why these ingredients are in everything. Like, you go into a package area in any grocery store, and these are commodities. They're no longer foods because they don't rot. They've been bought and sold and traded as a commodity. So these food companies now are taking commodity products and adding flavor enhancers, adding salt, fat, and oil, because these three things appeal to our reptilian brain, and we can't stop eating them. It's the perfect balance of calorie density, of sweet, like all of these things that our ancestors were programmed and developed to crave because that's what was calorie dense. And when you're running around in the bush and your food is uncertain, you want dense calories. So we haven't grown out of that, but yet we have all of the fat, oil, and salt in every single food. Like, I even opened a bag of potato chips recently, and I was like, these have sugar in them. Like, to me, a person that doesn't eat a lot of sugar or sweet foods, I was repulsed by the thought that they had added sugar even into potato chips, because that trifecta is something that just makes our brain go, eat more, eat more, eat more. So the flavor enhancers are a similar thing. So these are just, food has been designed to get us to buy more, to eat more, and to want more, to crave more. So industry for profit has completely bought out our food. So I go into the grocery store, and you can basically take everything in the middle aisles, and very little of that is food. You can get things like, bagged rice and bagged beans and canned tuna and things like that. And yes, those are real food, but pretty much anything that is designed to be eaten readily or quickly is no longer food. These are commodity crops that are fed stabilizers, preservatives, artificial colors, artificial flavors. We're putting artificial colors in kids' mac and cheese. So the #1 food that our children eat have 2 different food dyes, different flavorings. Like, this is a criminal action. Like, this goes beyond. These are food dyes that have been outlawed in other countries, like outlawed in Europe, outlawed in most of the developing world, and yet we think because orange is the taste of cheese, and it's not real cheese, so we need to add any little additive we can to fool people into thinking it's cheese. It's just like the Philip Morris in the beginning when they were developing cigarettes. They engineered how much smoke was actually released because people, as is, cigarettes didn't smoke that much. And so there was more satisfaction in the studies where there was a lot of smoke, because then it felt like it was doing something, you were getting something. And so cigarettes were engineered to those signals. Food is exactly the same way. And it's been engineered to our signal of craving salt, sugar, and oil. It's pretty terrible. And it's hard to undo that. It's hard to train your body to eat and love whole, real foods when, how chicken soup is supposed to taste to you is how the can tastes. And I saw that a lot with my grandmother. My maternal grandmother was the non-cook. And so she would get a box of Hamburger Helper or whatever, and then she would just add other stuff to it, like a box of soup mix, and then she'd add something else and make this pot of, I don't even know what, goulash, we'll call it. And so she would have this pot of stuff, and then she would take yogurt or Jello and then add some Cool Whip and then a can of like fruit cocktail. And so for me, making a fruit salad for her, it was too sour and it was too, it needed sugar. And so her flavor reference, her palate was so developed to those commodity foods that when you gave her the real option, it wasn't right, and she just couldn't eat it. So that a lot of that goes on in our food culture when people are so used to what, frozen dinners or say mac and cheese from a box. That's how mac and cheese is supposed to taste. when that's not really how mac and cheese is supposed to taste. So I think foods in our industrial food system does a huge disservice to people, palate-wise. And Americans, we don't really have an evolved and developed food culture. And I'll speak for Canadians as well. So it's not like, Ethiopia, where they've been eating the same foods and developing this food culture for hundreds of years. And so for us, like, our food culture is being defined by these corporations. And that's not right. Like, we're losing our ability to have developed palates, to learn, to even know that palate is something that you learn.
We don't have a food culture. We have a fast food culture.
We have a fast food culture. We have an instant food culture. We have, I want miso soup, and I'm going to open up a packet and microwave it for a minute and a half. Yeah.
I have a
So,
request for when we're done this challenge here, because it
yeah.
definitely wouldn't fall in this month. Just looking at a picture of these Maxine's cinnamon rolls or butter horns.
hmm
I think we need a video on that.
hmm So I was looking through, I moved it. I have a little recipe box of my grandmother, Maxine, my paternal grandmother, the one that was the cook, and her father was a chef, and his father was the chef, and they owned restaurants. And so she was an amazing foodie and very meticulous, and I did her fudge recipe. So I have a small collection of her recipes, and they're fabulous. So I was going to do a playlist and eventually just throw in, have them all up. So I have a record of all of them. But yeah, she did a butterhorn and a cinnamon roll that is, it's pretty delicious.
The picture looks pretty darn good.
So you'll see all of her recipes.
That'd be
They're
good.
very good. Um, let's see. Hence the reason I want to have a small farm, hunt or fish for my own meats, and have a back-to-Eden garden. I hear you on that one. Even veggies are not safe in the stores. That's very true. Um, so the interesting thing about food, especially vegetables and fruits, is they're irradiated. And what that does is it kills off, any sort of little bug or pathogen or anything that will potentially rot or discolor or speed up the food's natural cycle of breaking down. So the foods that aren't radiated are organic. It's not legal. They cannot radiate organic foods. Organic foods cannot be GMO. So when I was in college, I took a nutrition class, and we ended up collecting all of the kinds of papayas that we could, and from all over the world. We had Brazilian papayas, we had Mexican papayas, we had organic, Mexican, and conventional. We had papayas from Hawaii, both conventional and organic. And we broke them down in solution and looked at their DNA, and you could see the terminator gene in the genetically modified foods. So all of the Hawaiian papayas, Hawaii had a papaya blight years ago, and it wiped out the entire crop. And so they introduced genetically modified papayas. So if you buy a papaya from Hawaii, it is genetically modified unless it's organic. If you buy a Mexican papaya, it may or may not be. Some of them were, some of them weren't. The Brazilian papayas were all GMO free. So that was a really interesting study to look at something as benign and harmless and kind of innocent feeling as a papaya, and to know that this is one of the crops that have been bioengineered. And if you buy fruit and vegetables that aren't organic, they will irradiate them. So I had a bag of grapefruits, and we went out of town, and it was cold enough out in last spring that I put them out on the porch. So we were out of town for a couple weeks. I came back, and the grapefruits looked exactly the way they did when I bought them, and I thought the skin should have like dried up a little bit. So I left them there for the course of the summer. And that skin on that grapefruit really didn't do anything. It was terrible inside when I finally opened it up, but it looked almost perfect on the outside. And I was like, what are they doing to our
That's funny you should be bringing this up because I'm doing something exactly the same right now. I went to Walmart almost 3 weeks ago now, and I was just in a hurry, wanted a few vegetables, so I grabbed some tomatoes and red pepper, and brought it home, left it in the bag, forgot all about it for about a week. I thought, oh, I can't believe this isn't stinking or whatever. I took it out, looked fine. Coming up on 3 weeks now, and I've just left them there. They still look like the day I bought them.
Mhm.
The red pepper, and they're just sitting on my counter in bags.
Mhm.
Um, Not only will I not eat them, I won't even throw them into the compost. I won't even give them to the chickens. No way.
You know, it's wild. I have a friend who's a gardener, and he does odds and end jobs in his town, and he was picking up a house where somebody was kind of a hoarder, and they either died or they moved and they just left the house, and it was just surrounded by trash. So he was cleaning up. He had a dumpster, and he was cleaning up just like a lifetime worth of trash and garbage and debris. And he came across a bag of baby carrots, and they looked relatively fresh and new. And so he brought them home and did the same thing. And he's like, nothing ate them ever. Like, there was rats and mice and all sorts of stuff, and the baby carrots were largely intact. But baby carrots aren't baby carrots. You guys probably all know this. They're big carrots that have been whittled down. And then to keep them fresh and not turning white, because if you take the skin off a carrot and put it in your fridge, it's done. It's shriveled up in 2 days. So they soak them in a chlorine solution, and that keeps them for months. And so, yeah, just because it's a fruit or it's a vegetable doesn't mean it's any better off than the pastaroni.
And apparently they can get away with doing that even with the ones that are marked organic.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
So in organic, there's still, I know a lot of organic farmers, and there's a ton of chemicals and stuff that they are able to use.
they're
But
not
same
organic.
thing, if they spray them, animals or bugs or insects that land on that crop within, 4 hours of being sprayed are completely gone and wiped out. So, yeah,
Well,
organic
people try to
stuff.
get around the thought that a tomato or an apple or whatever, it's got to be perfect, it's got to be flawless. With my garden, I don't spray anything. I thought never even crossed my mind, and I go on the assumption that nature's going to take its share.
Right.
Live with it.
Yeah.
I, as you know, I had more tomatoes than I know what to do with, anyways.
Well, and somebody said the other day on my channel, they said, I would stop using chemicals in my garden if I could feed my family, but I have to spray chemicals to protect my food. And that's a very pervasive mindset because we have been taught and we've grown up with gardeners gardening in a conventional world where inputs are required. And so you have a nice garden and you put in a bed and you put in a whole row of corn and then you put in a whole row of potatoes and then you put in a whole row of this. Something comes in and wipes out that entire patch. Like all your lettuce is gone. So that you can't sustain gardening like that and be organic. Like you can't because it's going to be a constant battle for you as a gardener. So to mirror the natural systems and to have sacrificial plants, like I'll plant 20 kale plants in my garden. I love it, and I put them all over. I know that at least 4 of them are going to be absolutely infested with aphids at some point in the summer, and I'm okay with that. If I put them all together and I leave for a week, the entire patch would be infested, and I would lose it all.
There's
So
the thought, though, that the ones that are being eaten or destroyed are also the ones that were not all that healthy to begin with.
true. And
Trying.
soil health, as a gardener, you are a dirt farmer first and foremost. You will not grow good food unless you understand to a certain degree and you feed and you nurture that soil. It's so important.
Yep. I agree.
So, It's interesting. Like we have this mindset of, okay, we've been taught that for mechanization, we plant cropland in rows and we plant monocrops where we have 25 acres of lettuce. And then people are like, okay, so we can't use chemicals, so we're going to grow this organically. And they just stop the inputs. And you cannot do that. Like,
The soil's dead.
you cannot expect that. I mean, when the organic croplands are so fragile that the pickers have to go out in biohazard suits, there's a problem. So to mirror nature and to look at multi-cropping, at polyculture, at all of these concepts of mirroring the systems of nature, where I have a kale bush and it's by a potato and it is not doing good, but the one that's planted over here by a tomato and a blueberry is doing amazing. Like, so somewhere in my knowledge, I just make note of that. Like, and when I go out in the garden, this is going to sound totally hippie and new age, and I'm totally fine with that, but I allow the plants to tell me where they want to be. So I'm like, where am I going to put this? And I just look around. It's like, this feels good. I'm going to put it here. And it might be a terrible disaster for that plant. But to listen and to watch and observe and to make note and to allow nature to dictate to you and not you dictate to nature is a huge lesson for me as a gardener.
There's the companion planting as well. The one I saw, I forget what the video was, but it had to do with planting carrots, and this guy believed in weeding them out. Now I'm learning you don't need to do that, but he said, when you're weeding them out, you're going to get the smell of the carrots, and these bugs are going to come in. The thing is, those bugs don't like, I think it was green onions or something like that. So around the whole perimeter of the carrot patch, he planted these green onions. Mm-hmm. So it's it's not one thing.
Right.
You got to do the companion planting. You got to build up your soil. You
have to plant flowers.
Best for like you said, you plant the plants one place one year and they explode, and over here they just died. Well, plant them over there next year.
Yeah. And it might be the soil. It might be what's planted next to it, because I know tomatoes and potatoes do not like each other. But I separated them by just a small row of shallots. And I'm like, well, they're still in the same bed, but there was enough room for both of them. And so I just put 2 tomatoes over here. They did wonderfully, and probably better than most of the other tomatoes in the garden. So I'm like, so they either like the shallots, or they like the combination of shallots, or they just like the spot. So, but then, I also believe in crop rotation. So next year, it's a new experiment somewhere else. But flowers are really important. And so are beneficial weeds. So weeds are nature's way of covering the soil. You do not want bare soil. Like bare soil, you're just inviting pests. You're going against the natural system. Like, you don't see bare soil in nature. So plant a ground cover. Put in something like chamomile or something that's an edible cover to get rid of that space. It'll reduce your weeds. It gives the pollinator something to eat. Like, the natural system is so varied and complex, we can't possibly understand it. But to just watch and observe and to try stuff, it's remarkable, like, how you succeed and how much you learn about growing.
Well, and if you're planting flowers around your vegetable garden, first of all, there are some flowers that attract the bugs, but also you're going to be bringing in the bees, which are going to be pollinating your vegetables and everything.
Like, and they could attract the beneficial bugs too. Mm-hmm. Last year or 2 years ago, I saw these little eggs on the bottom of something, and it was something that I wanted. I don't know if it was like broccoli or something, and I just squished them and wiped them off. And as soon as I did it, I was like, I shouldn't have done that. And I went and I looked them up, and they were lacewing something rathers, like a super beneficial bug, like one of the most voracious aphid-eating bugs you could ask for. And I'm like, here, I just like, a bug is a bug, and I don't want it on my food. And I got rid of it. And now, I try not to do that. I try to learn and be more observant when I'm in the garden, because I know nothing out there.
Well, like I said, the I think the main reason I had so much success last year is because I had the chickens back there. Once everything started growing, they weren't in the garden; they were completely around the outside of it, but they were still doing an amazing job with pest control. I don't think I found um, any bugs on anything.
Yeah. It's it's really nice, and there are certain years. I'm a super neglectful gardener, and we go away a lot. We surf at the Oregon coast, and so we just go when there's good surf, and it could be good for 2 days, it could be good for 20 days, and so I just turn the water on. I'm like, good luck, and normally it does fine because it gets irrigated. But if a pest comes in, or if I get an aphid infestation or something, I'm not there to like get it in its infancy, and so I can have huge catastrophes out there. Or like the fence goes down and my chickens decimate my garden while I'm gone for 2 weeks in a row. So, for me, it's like it's such a learning experience. And I don't garden because I'm feeding a family, so I can be a lot more carefree and willy-nilly than some people. That's their livelihood, and they cannot lose that crop. And so, to experiment is one thing when it's your, supplemental food, but to experiment when you have people that you're feeding is a totally different deal. But with the internet, I mean, there's so much disinformation out there, but it's an amazing resource of information. If you're a discerning person at all, you can learn so much.
Yeah, I agree about the experimenting thing, but on the other, no, I'm not feeding a family either, so maybe I'm biased. But on the other hand, I don't see that throwing the chemicals, you're experimenting on your family.
You
It's
are, yeah,
That's not an experiment you want to do. Yeah, like you may lose you may lose a lot of your stuff, but at least you're not killing your family.
right.
And the thing is, as soon as you start throwing that stuff on the soil, it's toast. I think you need about 6 years to get it all out of there.
hmm Yeah, I have a friend he's an engineer, and he's a robotics engineer. And 3 years ago, we had the lacewing Drosophila come up from Northern California, and it's a terrible pest. We live in an agricultural valley, so soft fruits, stone fruits, apples, pears, peaches, apricots, all the berries are what we grow, and that's the livelihood of our community. And so the lacewing Drosophila came up, and it had been slowly migrating up, and it lays its eggs in soft fruit and then creates rot. And so it was a huge blow to the blueberry farmer that I go pick my blueberries from. So she's like, we had to spray, and I said, well, since you're spraying your blueberries, like I would pick 100 pounds at her farm, if not 120 during the course of a summer. So I said, I don't want to, I love you guys, I love the farm, but I just don't want to eat this stuff. And she's like, I understand that. And she's like, we wouldn't spray if we didn't have to. So come to find out, like her patch is big enough that they couldn't manually spray. So the organic option for spraying was a 4-time aerial whatever. So the plane goes over 4 times, it bud break, and during the course of the fruit's life. So it was a really interesting conversation where I didn't want to be the righteous consumer of, I'm not, you're spraying, I'm not eating your food, because I developed a relationship with this farmer and their family. That's what they depended on. But I wanted to know why she would do it, because blueberries are not notoriously a crop that need inputs. Like, it's kind of unnecessary. And so she explains the situation with the Drosophila. Now, this friend of mine who's a robotics engineer, he is working on developing something that can go through an orchard, some sort of robot that can spray nematodes or beneficial insects or something, but there's no known solution for this particular pest. So there's really amazing stuff that people are trying to do because they see that the food system is broken, but we've gotten so far away from nature that we don't even know where to start.
Well, a lot of the problems now are ones that we created. Why are we having such a bad problem with with these pests. Why have they gone out of control so much? Well, look at what we've done. Look at a good example is the flu. Look how bad it gets. Well, it keeps mutating because we keep trying to cure it.